I knew the tides were turning when Liz made me sit through a 3-hour meeting about celebrating authenticity, while someone in a branded hoodie handed out gluten-free cupcakes and made us chant, "We're all in this together." Meanwhile, I was still debugging a memory leak that had been quietly eating warehouse batch logs for 6 weeks. You know what OWL needed? RAM and clean code. Not affirmations. But here's the moment I knew I was royally, revocably screwed. I walked into my office one Monday and found a handwritten note from Liz, written in calligraphy, no less, taped to my monitor. It said, "Your silence is hurting the team." My silence? Lady, I built the system your salary rides on. Every unspoken line of code I wrote moves 80,000 units a week with less drama than your espresso machine. But hey, why value reliability when you can force people to wear matching t-shirts on Trust Fall Thursdays? Anyway, before we go deeper into the mess, real quick, if you're part of the 97% who binge these stories without subscribing, maybe now's a good time to change that. It seriously keeps the lights on for the crew bringing this chaos to life. And trust me, what's coming next? Worth the tap. Back to the disaster in progress. Liz was new blood, fresh out of some pastel startup where job titles were things like vibe manager and empathy facilitator. She didn't understand how this place actually functioned, how it needed structure, not scented candles. My job wasn't to smile and clap during meetings. It was to make sure OWL, the fulfillment algorithm I'd designed, ran 24/7 with military precision. It didn't matter if someone in shipping was hungover or if accounting accidentally double-billed a hospital supply chain. We caught it, rerouted it, and fixed it without a damn parade. But Liz didn't see that. What she saw was a middle-aged woman who didn't decorate her desk for Valentine's Day and didn't come to Friday mixers. She saw a threat to her team-building fantasies. It started subtle. Performance review template that now included things like emotional contribution and decor synergy. A sudden increase in team check-ins that felt more like interrogation sessions with baked goods. The data center guys started whispering that I should just play along, but I couldn't fake perkiness without developing a rash. Then one day in the lunchroom, where I only went because my office microwave was broken, I overheard her talking to another manager. "We've got too many legacy systems and legacy minds," she said, twirling her straw like she was plotting a musical number. "You can't build the future on dry code and cold personalities." That's when I knew. I was a dry code and cold personality problem, and she was about to fix me. Now, I'm not an idiot. I'd already seen the way they treated Carlos when he resisted switching to her HR feedback app. They sent him to a week-long perspective retreat in Arizona, and he came back broken like someone replaced his spine with a yoga mat. They were softening up the veterans one Cumbay at a time, so I started preparing. Quietly, carefully, the way I always had. I didn't throw a fit. I didn't try to defend myself in the company town hall. I just updated a few things. OWL was designed with resilience in mind, but also with contingencies. Fail-safes. Logic that activated if someone tried to remove the architect from the system without a proper handoff. Because I may not be the face of culture, but I damn well know how to write a ghost that bites back. The performance review packet hit my inbox like a glitter bomb from hell. Page 1 had a full-color wheel of emotional competencies with cartoon smiley faces ranging from radiant unicorn to needs support. Page 2 had a quote from Liz in pink cursive font. "We rise by lifting others and ourselves through radical kindness." Page 3, a bullet point that said, "Please reflect on how your attitude affects team warmth." I printed it out just so I could throw it in the trash by hand. Next thing I know, my quarterly feedback session was a mandatory 2-on-1 Zoom with Liz and a guy from HR named Travis, whose personality consisted entirely of head nods and the phrase "I totally hear that." Liz led the meeting like she was auditioning for a TED talk nobody asked for. She leaned in, put her elbows on the table like a therapist who charges $400/hour, and said, "Marla, we've noticed a pattern. You tend to be, how do I put this, emotionally unavailable in cross-functional environments." "I write back-end infrastructure," I replied. "It's supposed to be unavailable." She blinked. Travis nodded like a malfunctioning bobblehead. "They said I needed to attend a collaborative empathy workshop. They said my lack of eye contact during meetings was perceived as passive-aggressive. They said that when I responded to a Slack message with noted, it came across as dismissive. What they didn't say was that OWL had processed 2.3 million successful transactions this quarter without so much as a hiccup, while Liz was still trying to get her onboarding deck into the right font. But facts didn't matter anymore, only feelings, and apparently mine weren't the right kind. Meanwhile, OWL kept humming like a Swiss watch in a locked vault. I'd built it to be silent, thorough, and brutally precise. It flagged anomalies in invoices, fulfillment rates, supplier logs, hell, once it caught a typo in a vendor address that would have rerouted half our pacemakers to a closed Kmart in Nebraska. But last Tuesday, it found something different. Deep in the vendor payout logs, OWL caught a duplicate invoice labeled code Gracie T4A that had been manually approved. That alone wasn't shocking. People fat finger things all the time, but this one was overridden by a senior credential. Not finance. Not procurement. No, this override came from someone in the C-suite. And the timestamp, exactly 17 minutes before Liz's first welcome, email had hit the all-staff channel. I dug deeper. Couldn't help myself. Found the audit trail owl quietly attached to the event, like a dog dropping a dead squirrel at your feet. It showed that the override was initiated from an IP address inside the executive floor, right after a flagged report had failed a compliance check. Didn't know what code Gracie T4A meant yet, but my instincts curled like a fist. Then came the moment. We were in the Tuesday stand-up. Liz was holding court like she was queen of human Pinterest, telling people to embrace vulnerability as a metric. I kept my mouth shut, thinking about the override logs still glowing on my second monitor. Suddenly she turned to me and said, loud enough for the interns to hear, Marla, do you think you could model a little more collaboration today? Your energies felt very withholding, like you're not really on the team. I looked up, dead center of the room, every eye twitching between curiosity and pity. My face stayed still, but inside, something snapped and slid into place, like when you feel the first click on a combination lock. I didn't say a word, didn't need to. The damage was done, not to my reputation. That had been on the chopping block since Liz arrived. No, the damage was to her image of control. She thought she'd humiliated me. But in that moment, I wasn't embarrassed, I was activated. I walked back to my desk, sat down, and began quietly pruning Owl's runtime protocols. Not deleting, not sabotaging. Just making sure that if the architect disappeared, Owl knew what to do, and more importantly, who to tell. Came in the form of a calendar invite titled Staffing Realignment Discussion. Not even a subject line bold enough to say termination. Just a warm, vanilla-colored block from Liz's assistant, nestled between Smoothie Hour and Q3 Laughter Yoga. I clicked accept, knowing damn well I'd be the only one not walking out of that room with a job. They gave me a packet, 12 pages thick, full of legal throat clearing, and we thank you for your service bullshit. Liz smiled the whole time like she was offering me a coupon to a soul spa. Travis sat beside her, reading from a script like a nervous robot mid-meltdown. There's been a strategic decision to restructure the workflow layers in your department, he said, his voice cracking on the word strategic. I asked, how many people are in this restructure? Liz hesitated. At this moment, just you. I nodded, no flinch, no theatrics. I just picked up the pen and signed the dotted line. It was black ink on white paper, but it might as well have been blood on snow. What they didn't know, what nobody knew, was that Owl had been quietly watching me too. Not in a creepy sentient AI way, just in a fail-safe kind of way. I'd built it with a trigger, buried 5 protocol layers deep. If my credentials were deactivated without a proper handoff sequence, Owl would enter a 24-hour countdown. No fireworks, no alerts, just a silent timer. At midnight the next day, Owl would go dark, no backups, no cloned microservices. I'd made damn sure of that. You see, Owl wasn't just an algorithm, it was a brainstem, an invisible nervous system laced through the guts of our logistics empire. Every sensor ping, every load balance adjustment, every priority override ran through Owl's core. And all of it depended on me being there to babysit the beast. The dev team never questioned it. Why would they? It worked. Better than anything they'd ever seen. Owl didn't just predict inventory flow, it preemptively course-corrected based on supplier latency, weather anomalies, even truck driver PTO patterns. It was black magic wrapped in clean code. But they were about to find out what happened when you pulled the architect's plug. I also left them a gift, well, a bomb disguised as a bouquet. Long ago, I'd scheduled a final report. It only activated if my user permissions were nuked without a succession plan logged in the system. The report was simple. An executive summary of every compliance irregularity Owl had flagged over the last 18 months, including the ones someone with C-suite clearance had manually overridden. The subject line? System integrity exception initiated by user absence and the recipient? The full board of directors, not the exec team. Not Liz, the board. After signing the papers, I handed Travis the packet, stood up, and extended my badge to Liz. She reached for it like it was a trophy, like she'd finally conquered the bad attitude clogging her utopian pipeline. I let go of the badge, smiled faintly, and said, I hope the team gets the warmth they're looking for. She smiled back, oblivious. I think we all will now. When the elevator doors closed, I finally exhaled. Not a sigh of relief. More like a long, pressurized release. Like the kind that comes before a system reboot. Outside, the sky looked sharper than usual. Edges crisper. Sound carried differently. That's what freedom felt like. Cold, clean, and a little lonely. I didn't go out drinking, didn't text the few coworkers I trusted. I just walked home, sat in front of my terminal, and watched the Owl dashboard for the last time. Watched it quietly handle 47,000 tasks in under 90 seconds. Watched it purr. And then, at exactly 11:59 p.m., I shut my laptop. I didn't need to see the lights go out. I'd built the dark. At 12:00:01 a.m., Owl blinked out of existence. No bangs, no sirens, just silence where there used to be orchestration. The heartbeat of the company skipped once, then stopped entirely, like pulling the battery from a pacemaker and tossing it in the ocean. By 4:03 a.m., the first ripples surfaced. A fulfillment node in Detroit flagged an error, routing directive null. Source, SIS undefined. That meant 800 medical refrigeration units sat idle in a warehouse, waiting for instructions that would never come. By 4:47 a.m., a second node, Houston this time, timed out attempting to prioritize essential care packages, flagged for hurricane response routing. And by 5:12, the dashboard back at HQ showed 3,982 queued orders and no way to triage them. By 6 a.m., the fulfillment floor looked like a NASA launch room with all the astronauts dead. Bright screens, fast typing hands, people sweating over systems they barely understood because OWL had always handled the hard parts: routing, anomaly suppression, escalation prioritization. Now there was nothing but ghosts in the machines. And somewhere in the corner of the break room, Liz was sipping her oat milk latte, blissfully unaware that a digital iceberg had just ripped through her luxury cruise of intentional synergy. I was watching it all from my couch, wearing sweatpants with a hole in the knee and eating instant mashed potatoes straight from the pot. I logged in through an old Dev Sandbox account, never documented, never revoked, nestled deep in a testing server I'd spun up during the pandemic and left intentionally forgotten. OWL was offline, but its log mirrors were still feeding breadcrumbs into the monitoring system. I watched as the alarms triggered one by one. Inventory fallback fails, forecasting loop nulls, overnight logs with a runtime error I'd purposely left blank. Around 7:30 a.m., Liz finally noticed the smoke. She called an emergency stand-up, pinged every department head, and marched into the bullpen like General Mac culture. Her first question, why isn't this fixed yet? Her second question, who still has access to Marla's code? By 8:15, someone resurrected the last documented build of OWL. It hadn't been updated in 14 months, and even then, it only covered 40% of the infrastructure. They tried rerouting the system through a hybrid Kubernetes mesh, but the pipeline failed authentication because the secret key was tied to a sunset certificate, one I'd let expire on purpose, knowing no one ever reads expiring cert warnings if they're not the person who installed them. Then it happened. Liz sent a Slack message to the entire department. Bold font, red exclamation mark, the digital equivalent of screaming into a bullhorn. A channel, Marla left the company without proper documentation and failed to inform anyone about critical redundancies. We are doing everything we can to rebuild her system from available notes. Appreciate your patience. The comments under it were a masterclass in passive-aggressive theater. Was there a backup? Who was her backup? Didn't she flag this last year? OWL was undocumented? That seems like a leadership issue. I closed my laptop halfway through the comment thread. I'd seen enough. The company was drowning, and Liz had just thrown me under the bus while trying to keep her hair dry. Let her. Let them. Because none of them realized yet that the real damage wasn't 4,000 missed orders or the fact that HR had to manually call vendors like it was 1996. No, the real nuke was already in the air. They just hadn't seen it coming yet. At 9:12 a.m. Eastern Time, the board's collective blood pressure spiked like a faulty defibrillator. It started innocently enough. A red flag report hit every board member's inbox with the subject line, "Urgent, System Integrity Exception initiated by user absence." No one knew what it meant. Hell, most of them didn't know what OWL was, beyond some operations tool the COO used to brag about at investor dinners. But when a digital report bypasses the executive chain and lands directly in the laps of the money men, well, suddenly IT isn't invisible anymore. They opened it expecting to see graphs, maybe a system outage chart, or a batch log of missed deliveries. What they got instead was a single line item, buried halfway down the second page, highlighted in soft gray with a bold timestamp, and a status that simply read, "Override, $1,234,000 compliance exception manually cleared code Gracie T4A exec auth ID, CCO, timestamp, June 12, 0817, code gray." The kind of internal marker reserved for situations that could get federal eyes involved. Situations that trigger clawbacks, audits, and front-page headlines. The CFO's name was tied to the override. So was the COO's. And the kicker? The timestamp matched Liz's first morning on the job. Same day, same hour. Same minute her saccharine "I'm so thrilled to be here" welcome speech was happening in the main atrium with catered acai bowls and jazz flute. And here's the part that makes me grin in my sleep. OWL didn't just log the override. It logged who ignored the system's auto-escalation protocol, the system that was supposed to route red-flagged compliance issues to the board directly if upper management failed to respond within 72 hours. But they didn't just fail to respond, they buried it, overrode the pipeline, wiped the flag from the dashboard, and marked it handled internal. Except OWL didn't forget. OWL doesn't forget anything. I'd programmed it to clone red flag data snapshots and store them in cold memory until my user credentials were wiped. Only then would it trigger the dead letter delivery, sealed, signed, and certified by Owl's own self-verifying hash system. By 10:05 a.m., the board was in full emergency session. CEO skipping a keynote speech, general counsel paging outside legal, investors pinging for answers, and somewhere in the confusion, someone finally asked the obvious question: why did we find out about this today? They didn't know that Owl's silence had always been conditional, that the machine only stayed quiet as long as the people behind it played by the rules. Once I was erased from the system without a proper key rotation, it spoke the truth. And its truth wasn't kind. That was the point. This was never about the 4,000 missed orders. I didn't care about the temporary chaos. That was just smoke to get the sprinkler system to wake up. This was about the infection buried deep in the system. The way they weaponized HR buzzwords to purge people who got too close to the truth. The way they let execs walk away clean while wagging fingers at poor communication and cultural resistance. Let them sort that mess now. Let them try to explain why two of their top brass manually cleared a compliance breach involving over $1 million in questionable payouts, while hiring a new HR director to rebrand the company as a sanctuary of trust. Let them realize the quiet woman in the corner, the one who didn't smile at potlucks or decorate her cubicle, built a system that could whisper the company's sins to the board from beyond the grave. Grim satisfaction doesn't even cover it. It was righteous, mechanical vengeance. And I didn't lift a damn finger. By noon, the building smelled like fear and leftover smoothies. The board didn't waste time. Within 3 hours of the Owl report detonating in their inboxes, both the CFO and COO were suspended pending internal investigation. Corporate speak for you're already gone, we just need to make it look procedural. Their badges stopped working by lunch. Legal requested copies of every override log from the last 18 months. IT compliance, formerly a department of 2 ignored engineers and a dusty server, was suddenly the hottest room in the building. And then, someone leaked it. Might have been a board assistant. Might have been a bitter junior dev finally fed up with the ping-pong tables and performative transparency. Doesn't matter who. All that mattered was the headline. $1.2M compliance breach at Fulfill Net. Internal system flags execs in audit leak it hit Tech Pulse, then CNBC, then Reddit. Within 2 hours, our major partner, an international health logistics conglomerate, froze all contracts and issued a public statement about conducting a review of third-party integrity standards. Translation? They were jumping ship before the sharks caught blood. Client success managers started getting emails with phrases like fiduciary exposure and waiting for Q4 clarity. Procurement panicked. Legal practically set up tents in the war room. People who hadn't touched a keyboard in 6 years suddenly wanted system logs, diagrams. Explain it like I'm 5 overviews. And Owl, still offline, still silent, its dashboard now a hollow shell where perfect order used to hum. Then came Liz's turn under the blade. An emergency executive review was called late that afternoon. Not the cushy quarterly sit-down with mood lighting and fruit trays. No, this one had teeth. She walked into that room looking like she'd just lost a pageant. Hair pulled tight, face strained with that Stepford smile panic you only see when someone realizes they backed the wrong horse and lit the barn on fire. They grilled her. Hard. Why were there no redundancy protocols? Why was a single architect allowed to control a mission-critical system with no oversight? Why weren't the compliance reports audited? Why did she allow a key staffer to exit without knowledge transfer? She tried to pin it on me. Claimed I withheld documentation. I was hostile to team culture. But then someone on the review board held up a printed email I'd sent her 6 months ago, flagging the exact compliance logging issue. Subject line, audit handling flow urgent, timestamped, unanswered. She stammered, blinked, said she must have missed it, that she'd been onboarding, that it wasn't her responsibility. But the damage was done. The board now had more receipts than a CVS aisle, and me? I turned off my final alert. The Dev Sandbox burner account was wiped. Owl's clones dissolved back into the ether. I shut down the encrypted tunnel I'd been using to peek in from the outside and deleted the script that used to run every morning at 6:01 to check system health. That part of my life done, dismantled like scaffolding after the real building's been tested by fire. I wasn't mad anymore. I wasn't even smug. I was just done. Closed the laptop and stared out the window at a thunderstorm rolling in. Big, sweeping clouds. The kind of sky that warned you something was ending or beginning. Let them play cleanup. Let Liz white-knuckle her way through postmortems. Let the board draw their little flowcharts and wave their acronyms like shields. I had done my part, quietly, precisely, with code instead of chaos. I didn't burn the house down. I just removed the wiring and watched them light the match. They found the note 2 days later. Folded deep in the metadata of the shutdown report, encoded as a non-indexed attachment, timestamped with a digital signature that matched my old credentials to the millisecond. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a bombshell. Just a plain, 3-paragraph memo I'd written 6 months before Liz ever stepped foot in the building, flagging anomalous override behavior connected to vendor payouts labeled under the code gray internal tag. I titled it Potential Audit Suppression Pattern Request for Review. I'd CC'd the general compliance inbox. I'd also sent it directly to two board members I knew had a faint technical pulse. Neither responded. No read receipts, not even a bounce. Back then, I still believed the system could correct itself, that if I flagged it loud enough, if I used the right words, someone with power would do something. I hadn't designed OWL to expose, it was built to support. Make sure those with integrity had the tools to keep things running straight. But silence breeds rot. So the day I knew I was being phased out, I went back and embedded that same note inside the system's death rattle. OWL's shutdown wasn't just a blackout, it was a confession booth with a tripwire. The report didn't just list the compliance breach. It listed the ignored warnings, the bypassed pings, the access log of every exec who'd seen the alerts and dismissed them. Right at the bottom of the file, in an appended section labeled Architect Statement, was my note. Digitally signed, immutable, a whisper that became a gunshot. When the board found it, they went very, very quiet. The kind of quiet you only hear right before someone gets fired or subpoenaed. They realized in one sickening gulp that I hadn't abandoned my post. I'd been shoved off it, and the people who did the shoving knew exactly what they were covering up. It was Liz who'd led the campaign to make me culturally redundant. It was the CFO who'd personally overrode the system's safeguards. It was the COO who fast-tracked the restructuring memo that terminated me, timed just hours before a quarterly audit window. And now they were staring at an indestructible receipt. Not one born out of vengeance, but out of preparation. I didn't want war. I didn't even want justice. I just wanted my warning heard. And when it wasn't, I made damn sure the silence wouldn't hold forever. The report wasn't an act of rebellion. It was a resurrection of the facts, of the truth, of my name. Let them say what they want now, call me cold, call me difficult, call me obsolete. But they can't say I didn't try, they can't say I wasn't right, and they sure as hell can't say I was ever negligent. Bittersweet doesn't even scratch the surface. I'd built a system that served without recognition and died without complaint. But when I was cornered, it did the one thing no team-building exercise ever taught them to expect. It told the truth. And the truth didn't need applause. It only needed a timestamp. The call came just past sunrise, as I sat on the back patio of my sister's cabin nursing a mug of diner-grade coffee and watching fog roll over a lake that didn't care about compliance reports or Slack threads. Blocked number. I almost let it ring out. Almost, but curiosity is a hell of a drug, I answered without saying a word. Marla? Liz's voice was already cracking like she'd been crying or yelling or both. Listen, I know things have gotten complicated, but you need to come in. They're saying legal action. You have to help fix this. This is bigger than just you, okay? We were a team. I stared out at the still water. Birds chirping like nothing was wrong. No chaos, no system crashes, just morning, peaceful and cruel in its indifference. Team, I finally said. No, Liz, I was the team, and I hung up. No dramatics, no long goodbye, just that. She didn't call back. An hour later, my old coworker Jess, one of the few I still trusted, texted me a screenshot. Internal memo leaked company-wide. Subject line, immediate leadership restructure and full internal audit announcement. Underneath it, the names of 3 executives stepping away to focus on family. HR was now under interim oversight by legal. OWL's system logs were to be forensically reviewed by an external compliance firm. No mention of me, not directly, but they knew. Everyone knew. I took another sip of coffee. It tasted better than it had in months. By noon, another image went viral on our company Slack before it got nuked by mods, a photo snapped by someone in facilities. Liz walking past the bullpen. Alone, hair unbrushed. That Shine Gun HR smile finally cracked and flickering. Her arms were full of binders, a framed live laugh lead poster tucked under one elbow, and a plastic plant sticking out of a box labeled Wellness Assets. Behind her, facilities guy peeled down the last remnants of her culture wall. The one with all the glitter quotes and pastel hashtags. The adhesive didn't come off clean. That wall was stained with it now, just like the company. No one met her eyes as she passed. The desks were empty. The ones that weren't were cold and quiet, filled with people staring hard at screens, pretending not to see her. She had tried to rewrite the DNA of a company with slogans and smoothies. She forgot who built the spine. And she forgot what happens when you cut it loose. It came tucked between junk mail and a coupon for tire rotations, an old-fashioned postcard, battered at the edges, hand-addressed in blue ink like a relic from a better timeline. On the front was a photo of our old office building. The irony wasn't lost on me. The image showed it lit up from the outside, all glass and glow, like a tech temple. But I knew what the insides looked like now. Vacant cubicles, silent monitors, and a fresh coat of HR issue beige desperately trying to cover the scorch marks. I turned it over. The handwriting was familiar, shaky but earnest. Hey Marla, I don't know if you still check this address, but I had to say thank you. You probably don't remember, but during my internship you told me real systems don't need applause. They just need to not fail. I never forgot that. The board reached out, offered me the rebuild, OWL 2.0 or whatever they'll call it. I said yes. And I told them one condition: your name stays in the commit log, first line, always. Dev, I sat down on the porch steps, sunlight warming my knees, the kind of late morning quiet that city offices never allow. I read it twice, maybe 3 times, then I smiled, small and slow. The kind that doesn't need to be seen by anyone to be real. Legacy intact. I didn't reply. I didn't forward it. I didn't fold it into some burnable file of nostalgia. I just slid it into the back of a drawer next to a thumb drive marked Final Owl Build Cold Archive and closed it softly. There'd be no interviews, no LinkedIn victory lap, no smug tell-all Medium post. That's not how I built things. That's not how I ended them. I didn't torch the place. Didn't light a single match. I just turned off the lights and let the shadows dance until someone noticed the silence. In the final board audit report, buried between procedural summaries and legal recaps, one line remained untouched, uncensored, and painfully honest. System shutdown initiated by absence of architect. Let them sit with that. I already had. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.